Thank you so much. It's a beautiful welcome. It's great to be here. I look out at the ocean. There's no hurricane. So very happy about that, very happy. And that's why they call it the Pacific Ocean, right? So anyway, yes, self-regulated learning. And these are the outcomes for you. This is the promise of what you're going to be able to do in about an hour and a quarter. You're going to be able to explain what self-regulated learning is and why it's important to teach, why you will want to teach it. You're going to be able to sell the assignments and practices, the practice of it, to your students by when you tell them what the benefits are. And there are lots of benefits, and they're all research-based. You are going to be able to engage students in practicing it as well with assignments and activities that will have them do it. And then they'll see the results, and then they'll pretty much be sold. So anyway, I want to just speak a little informally about self-regulated learning and what it is. First of all, it's kind of like, it's an approach to learning. It's learning how to learn on your own when you don't have somebody holding your hand. Because that's the way the future is going to be for a lot of our students. You know, as they change jobs, that their jobs become more complex, or the technology changes, the skills, knowledge, all this becomes different. Or when their career sort of winds down, they're going to have to find a new one, and they're not going to have a teacher in front of the room, you're helping them through the learning process. They're going to be learning online. Their employers are not going to be doing a lot of teaching for them. They say, here, this program, and bye, good luck. So anyway, so that's a real challenge for them. But when you know, this approach to learning that really involves something I'm sure you're very familiar with, that voice in your head that asks you questions about your learning. As in, when, let's say you read a couple of paragraphs of something and you ask yourself, did I understand that? Did I get that? Can I paraphrase that very, very briefly? Can I think of an example? Did it make sense? I mean, you know, and we do that, right? You know, we converse with ourselves or with the actual text that we're reading as we think of questions, or we think of like critiques. But anyway, that's active learning, okay? And so this is what students need to do when they are in a learning situation, is to get that voice in their head activated. And now we, very much, this is why I call this, by the way, active learning on the inside, because this is where the learning really, really takes place. You can only do so much for them. You can think of ways to motivate them. You can put them in like fun and interesting learning situations, structure things for them, structure activities for them, and this and that, where it's difficult for them not to learn, but if they want to fight you, they can. Because any way you cut it, they have to process the experience that you're giving them. And that's absolutely essential. You might think, well, I've been talking to myself for years when I'm reading something. And that's just it. Yes, you have, and that's why you're here and not somewhere else. Because you somehow picked that up along the way. But, and I like to say this because it really makes a lot of sense, the best students, and you are the best students, can grow up to become the worst teachers. Because we kind of figure that, all students are doing what we were doing, all our students, or we think like, why don't you understand this material? I got it the first time. I didn't have any bottlenecks with it, right? Of course, I'm married to my discipline, and I fell in love with it and all that. But and we go outside of our discipline, and then then we're students again, right? It's a wonderful thing when we do that. So anyway, but we are not. This is why we need faculty development. We are in a handicap position to help our students learn our material. In a way, we are. We really are. There is some evidence out there that students are not talking to themselves in their heads about their learning and what they are learning, or its meaning, its importance. I will tell you about a study that was done very recently on 132 veterinary students, professional students, right? And so they should know all about learning. And they were asked, what are the most important factors in your learning? And they said the quality of the instruction and the curriculum. That's fine that they said that, but too few of them, very few of them, said anything about their own learning habits and skills. And these are professional students, so our undergraduates aren't thinking along these lines either. Sometimes our undergraduates, I swear, they look at learning as the weather, something that happens to them, you know, or something that doesn't happen to them. But they're not really in control of it. You are, Carlson, right? It's all about you, so you gave me a C, right? I'm certainly, you've heard that before. Never, no, because you don't give C's, right? But no, I mean, they don't feel empowered with their own learning. They really, really don't. And this is very sad. This is very sad. And we need to give them a greater sense of empowerment. And self-regulated learning will absolutely do that. Because they learn, oh, gee, it has something to do with what I do. Oh, okay, yes, everything to do with what you do. So here's a more formal definition of self-regulated learning. The conscious planning, monitoring, and evaluation of one's learning in order to maximize it or increase it. It is intentional, it is mindful, it is self-aware, it's self-disciplined, it is reflective and introspective. As we know, most of us, by the way, are introverts, and so we do a lot of introspection, but most people out there are not. 75% of the people, they say, are extroverts, and sometimes extroverts don't. They do something, but they don't think about it first, right? They have tremendous faith that when they will finish the sentence in a coherent way. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. No. But they have faith, you know? They've got faith. Anyway, multi-stage, okay? Planning, monitoring, evaluation, before, during, and after, right? So it's a process. And multidimensional, and let me explain the dimensions. The first dimension is metacognition. This is the cognitive part of self-regulated learning. A lot of you have heard about metacognition. It's thinking about your thinking, being aware of your thinking, monitoring it, watching it, and that's wonderful. But with self-regulated learning, there is also an emotional part, emotional and motivational control, and a physical part, that is control over the physical environment that one is in for learning. Are you in a good environment for you? Have you chosen intelligently? And have you experimented to find out what's good for you? So if you take out the ivory piece of paper, the ivory handout, I should say, you will see something that looks like this. The learner's questions, the questions that a self-regulated learner will ask him or herself. These make great activities and assignments too, and I'm going to be talking about quite a few of them, but keep these in mind as well. So you cross the stages with the dimensions, and then in here, in the cells, are the questions that students should be asking themselves. So metacognitively, when they are thinking, okay, I'm going to be doing this reading now, or it could be I'm going to be writing a paper, I'm going to be watching this video, whatever it is, it's for learning purposes. The first thing that students should be doing is asking, okay, what kind of a task is this? Now, you get experience with these sorts of things, you know exactly what kind of a task it is. So a lot of these questions you don't have to ask them again. But this one you do. What is my goal, and how will I know if I've reached it? So what is your point in doing this? What do you want to be able to take with you to show that you got to the learning level that you were hoping for. And for instance, let's say reading a chapter, 5 parts of the chapter, you want to be able to summarize, summarize each section in your own words in a couple of sentences after you're done reading. Okay, and you want to do this from memory. You want to do this from memory. And that's good. It could be just basic stuff, doesn't matter. And so that's the goal. You know, can I do that? When I'm done with this chapter, will I be able to do that? And if I am, hooray, right? And if I can't, well, that's the interesting part. Okay, so I've got this task ahead of me. I'm still asking myself questions, so it's a little bit strange to me. And, you know, it can be strange just because, you know, yes, you've read chapters before, but not in this discipline, right? You know, whatever it is. So anyway, what strategy should I use? How should I do this task? Should I underline? Should I write marginalia in the margin? Should I take notes on it, write out notes? Should I quiz myself? What's my best approach, most efficient approach, but also effective approach? So, and there are other questions as well. Emotionally, this whole framework assumes that you can control your emotions. And a lot of students will find this idea alien. They're not used to saying, well, I'm a victim of my emotions. But you're not, because you can always recast a situation or reframe it, is what counselors and psychologists use the terminology of reframing a situation, seeing it from a different perspective. So it's a matter of saying, okay, so maybe you're not so interested, maybe you're not so motivated, but what did the instructor say about this reading or this book or whatever it is, or what I'm going to be learning in this course that will be useful to me somewhere along the line in my life or my career? And so you've got to say something about somewhere along the line where how it's going to be useful. But it's up to them to remember that and to motivate themselves to do this. Another thing that they have to be concerned about is their confidence level, to find that sweet spot between overconfident, oh yeah, I can knock this off, all I got to do is read it, right? I don't have to do anything, no strategies. Or being not confident enough to really tackle the process with any kind of hope, right? And so they've got to find, and they can find it. There are ways that they can, think about their past and what they've done in the past that was similar, and they're responsible for that. And then the environmental. What kind of setting is best for me to do this reading in or write this paper in? So setting. Some people are coffee shop people. They work very well in that environment. They work very well with quite a bit of caffeine in themselves, and some people don't do that. Or do you need to go to the library where it's very quiet, or can you, work in a lounge in the residence hall? I mean, you've got to figure out what works for you. Maybe the residence hall has a little bit of noise. Maybe it has a little bit of music. The music is an interesting thing because for a minority of students, music works well as long as they're familiar with the music. If it's new music, nah, that won't work because that will be distracting. But if it's old music that they've listened to 100 times, that can be just fine for them to listen to in the background. But if other people, most people, no, not at all. Any kind of noise can be distracting. What about the temperature in the room? What about the amount of coffee that I've drunk? How is my sleep level? Have I had enough sleep such that I'm not wasting my time? Because, sleep is very important for consolidating learning. What about the physical position, your chair, this sort of thing? That has to be taken into consideration. People are different.
Linda, what are we supposed to do with these? Give these to students, or I don't mean to
Oh, if you'd like. Oh, by the way, this is not in my book. So there's no copyright. I mean, I've got the copyright, right? But yes, if you can make wallpaper out of it. Okay, that's fine with me.
What would you suggest?
Okay, I would suggest that you do give it to them, but I'd also suggest that you take some of these questions out and you might turn them into assignments. Yeah, especially with respect to maybe what for the first reading, for instance, at least part of it, parts of it, certain key questions that you think are particularly important. Like strategies. What strategy are you going to be using to do this? And how do you know that it's going to work well? I mean, some students won't have a clue. It's all I know. You go from the first word to the last word. You move your eyes back and forth, and no. But that is very insightful for them. First of all, for them to know how they do it, and for you to know how they do it, so you can give them other strategies, because they might not have another strategy. They might not have picked them up. And they need strategies. They need to be able to try different things. But yeah, that's what I would do. But I'd give them the whole thing, saying, this is what a self-regulated learner is thinking about before, during, and after a learning process of some sort. And then there are the distractions, so the cell phones that need to go, well, preferably out the window in another building or something, but in another room will also do. But students are too conditioned to grab for them every 5 to 10 minutes, and they might not even realize that they're doing this. And there have been a couple of studies that students didn't even realize they were doing this till they saw themselves on Camtasia. They said they were being recorded. And so, oh no wonder it took me 3 hours to read 5 pages. So anyway, okay. Monitor. Oh, sure.
I again, tying to some big picture stuff that Joe touched on. I'm finding that my students in particular, they have a big barrier to wanting to read at all, right? So emotionally, even get them to say, "Oh, I'm actually going to do this," is really a challenge in and of itself, right?
Right.
They would rather they would rather hunt for hours on the internet for a video over a content section,
right,
than to actually read what we've asked them to read.
Yeah,
right? So, I mean, I think by the time they're getting ready to read, they've already expended a lot of energy, just mentally, emotionally, and whatever.
Yeah.
Now I'm saying, how does this fit in? Asking them, in addition to that energy, to put in this.
Right.
Oh, I think it's very valuable. I'm just asking.
Yes.
How do you convince them it's worth doing? That's maybe
First of all, you have to explain to them why they hate reading. Okay. And the reason these are rational people. Okay. They don't know how to read effectively. So their experience in the past has been, when I read something, I don't remember a thing from it, because they've been doing the eye routine.
PE for instead your eyes, that's what I tell them.
Yeah, exactly. PE for it builds muscles in your eyes. But that's not reading. Right. Reading is all about focus. Now, you can't tell me students can't focus, because they can sure focus on this, right? They can focus on that really easily. So they can focus. But they're not making themselves focus on reading because they don't know how to do it. So that's part of the problem. The thing is that with these self-regulated learning exercises, assignments, if you wrap them around readings, or call them wrappers, is that it does get them to do the readings. Okay. And so we're using a carrot and a stick here. The carrot is learning how, so that they're not wasting their time, and the stick is that they're getting some sort of credit for it, and they won't get credit if they don't do it. Okay. So, and I think it takes both. I really, really do. Okay. I've never been able to train a dog just on positive reinforcement. Sometimes you just got to say no. So you've got to say, like, good girl, and no, Anyway, during the monitoring process, cognitively, while they're reading, they have to be asking themselves questions like, am I making progress is this making sense? Are my strategies working? Am I seemingly making progress towards my goal? Have I maintained my focus? Am I focused, which is the key? And how well are my strategies working? Should I try something else? How is what I am learning related to what I already know? Because that's very important for getting new material into long-term memory. On the emotional side, again, monitoring the reactions, monitoring one's reactions to the material. Sometimes students will be reading something that rubs them the wrong way. This is not what I have thought all my life, right? This is not how I thought the seasons worked at all. And there will literally be emotional resistance to it. And they have to be, first of all, be aware of that resistance. And secondly, overcome it, perhaps just by suspending judgment. Okay, I'm going to, quote, listen to this author. And so, to leave it at that. And by the way, if we don't teach our students how to read now, how are they going to, I don't know, you know how, you read things, you're like, how something works, how, let's say, some software works. I mean, you can't fool around with it all day. This is not what you do at the workplace, fooling around with it. You've got to, read the manual. I mean, it's something that they're going to have to learn how to do, whether they like it or not. But yeah, they're going to have to, we don't like doing what we're not good at. We really, really don't. I despise football. I just despise it. I don't want to play football. I'll die, okay? So, and I'm no good at it, and so anyway, so I don't like it. All right, makes sense. Okay, so emotionally, that's very important for students to be aware of their resistance, and of course, physically, they need to be, monitoring how they're feeling. If they need to take a break, but really need to take a break, they should be able to work for at least a half an hour, especially initially, without having to walk around the room, but then walk around the room. Take a 30-second to 1 minute break. It's okay. I don't know, you've got candy there, pop some candy in your mouth, whatever. Every 2 hours, a learner should take a longer break. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that, a little bit more physical or more sensory, eating, whatever. So they need to realize that yes, they will feel more refreshed and be more efficient if they take a break and come back. Now, everybody's got a different schedule on these breaks, but that every 30 minutes and every 2 hours is one that works for a lot of people. So anyway. And then, of course, they've got to be monitoring their physical environment as well, in terms of if they've been drinking coffee, they got to think, okay, is this a time to stop, or maybe I need coffee now? All right? Whatever. It depends on how you react to it. People react differently. After a learning performance is completed, then there's this evaluation process. So the first thing you do is the cognitive part. Okay, can I do what I set out to do, which was to be able to, summarize 5 major points from this chapter? And if you can do it, great. What am I still having trouble understanding? What should I ask the professor about tomorrow? How has my thinking on the topic changed? How did my strategies work? Should I try other things if I wasn't particularly successful in remembering all of the things I wanted to remember? What should I do differently next time that I do this type of task? So, and then there's the emotional reaction, especially to whether one could meet one's goal or not. And if one met one's goal, hooray, hooray. Then you're more motivated to do this next time. You've been successful. You've got a strategy that's working for you. This is great. But what if you didn't? What do you do with that disappointment? Do you give up? Say, well, I'm just not good at this. I shouldn't have taken this course to begin with. I can't possibly major in this. This is not my thing. I don't want to do this anymore. I think I'll drop out. Or do you decide, I'm going to try another strategy? Again, assuming that you have a repertoire of strategies to try. And that what comes down to us. Because if anybody knows how to learn, hey, it's us, right? We're the learning experts. Who else is going to tell them? Who else has told them so far? Nobody, right? So the buck stops here. And it doesn't take long to suggest different ways that you might go through a chapter to learn the material, for instance, or ways to approach a paper. This is our bag, okay? So, all right. So I'm going to do a little mini lecture wrapper with you, a little activity that you might do with your students. And this is called a concept test. So at the end of a mini lecture, you display a multiple choice question, preferably conceptual or application, on what you were just talking about. And then students, quote, click in their answers or register it some way. I'm not a big fan of their getting out their cell phones and getting distracted by that, because they'll just click in and answer and then they'll be off to the races, right? So, or business students are trading stocks, and I've seen people going, males going off into pornographic sites, because I've observed a lot of classes. Oh yeah, I know, right in the middle of a math class, and I'm right behind them. I mean, what are you thinking? But but now I can use that story as a learning device, right? I know. And going shopping, going to Reddit, going here, going there. It's just amazing where they go. So anyway, I don't recommend doing the poll everywhere thing. I just don't do it. So colored pieces of paper work even better, because there's nothing you can do with a colored piece of paper, nothing much, right? And so you fold it up, say red is A, blue is B, yellow is C, okay? And you can give them out pieces of paper and they can use it that way, and it's just fine. But keep it small so people aren't looking around everywhere. Gee, there's a lot of red. The answer must be A. Now, then they talk about it for a minute or so, and then they, quote, click in their answers again. Clickers are wonderful things because all you could do with them was click in answers. I mean, you couldn't roam off anywhere. But they're gone. So, okay, so you're going to do this. I want you to, the following question, I want you to select the correct answer, what you believe to be the correct answer, pair off for a minute or so, talk about it, and select the correct answer again. Now, we're not really going to do this whole thing because I'm not going to ask you to register an answer. Okay, but this is the procedure. But so, which of the following is a self-regulated learning activity for your students or for students? And don't add anything to the activity, because if you start adding things, they all could be, right? And then I'll ask them to no, just as this is. Are you talking about D?
B is the only actively self-regulated. The other ones is where you could do self-regulation.
Yeah.
What you're saying.
Yeah. A plus. B. It's B. Yeah. Yay! Oh, good. Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. And I mean, this wasn't like a a killer question. So, yeah, exactly. My dog could have answered that correctly. So, I mean, good girl, like, no, don't give me the thing like how smart you are. All right, benefits of students here. Okay, more learning. Even if they don't care about learning, they sure care about grades, don't they? Okay. Higher quality thinking and more of it. Professionalism. Motivation. Nothing motivates like success. And adult success later on, especially with respect to keeping up with whatever their career might be and retooling for a new one, if they need be, and they probably will have to. So let me give you just a sliver of evidence for this, because there's lots more in my book if you're interested in it, because there have been quite some studies of this. And so anyway, but there's this guy named John Hattie who has a team of people, and he and his team do meta-analyses. So they're doing meta-analyses of a lot of meta-analyses. So, and when I say mega, like this one that I'm talking about, this particular study that they published, was of 800 meta-analyses. That's mega. Specifically on the teacher behaviors and the pedagogies, different teaching methods, and their effectiveness with respect to learning. Okay, and they did it through all levels. And what they found, teacher clarity was very, very high, had a strong, what's called an effect size. And what that means, an effect size of 0.75 means that a one standard deviation, let's say increase, but it can work increase or decrease, but on the average, a one standard deviation increase in teacher clarity was associated with a 3/4 of a standard deviation higher in learning, increase in learning. So that's what effect size is. And it's something that you can you can estimate over a over a range of studies. Getting feedback makes sense that it would be high, 0.73 effect size. Space versus mass practice, 0.71 makes sense. Mass practice is cramming. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Space practice is you're studying, a little bit on Sunday, a little bit on Monday, a little bit on Wednesday, a little bit, not a little bit, but you're not doing it all the night before. Metacognitive strategies, also high, and this is just the metacognitive part of self-regulated learning. 0.69. Metacognitive strategies had a stronger effect size than all these other things that we know are highly effective. Cooperative learning, by the way, that's a fancy term for a structured form of group work. So how do you get students to practice self-regulated learning? Well, you do certain activities in class. They're brief. They reinforce the content. So it's not like you're wasting your time. Or you give self-regulated learning assignments. Most of these are very small. This is why students don't mind. They're short. They are low to no stress. Okay, it's not like they're right answers and they're fretting over that. And you make it worth something, some sort of credit. Okay, worth a point, whatever, because then students know that you consider it to be important. You don't mind it either, because you're not grading the activities. If it's an assignment, you're grading it, and 9 times out of 10, you're grading it just pass-fail. Unless it's a piece of an experiential learning thing where the reflection is what it's all about. Okay, and it's supposed to be long. But most of these, hey, did they do it? And by do it, I mean, did they, if there were like 2 or 3 parts, did they do all 2 or 3 parts? And did they meet the length requirement, which you have to set? Because otherwise they will have no idea of how long to go or when to stop. So some kind of, it might be 150 words or 50 words. It all depends. You can eyeball it and figure out if it meets that requirement. Usually students won't have a problem with that anyway. These are, again, short assignments that you almost can't go wrong in. It will take you longer to lie, to figure out, ooh, what will I write? Now, it might be more creative, but this isn't what it's all about. So it's just simpler and easier just to, give the reflective truth. What did you find most interesting in the chapter? Oh, well, or no, let me look for something that was really boring and just say that. No, and then you and your students start to see the results pretty quickly. And students are going to be pretty pleased that they're starting to do better. So this is sort of like a, catalog or table of contents of the kinds of activities and assignments there are. Start and end of course, and when I say start and end, because most of the ones for the start of class they're like bookends. There's a bookend at the end of the course to sort of wrap it up. Reading wrappers or whatever, video podcast, whatever you're assigning. Reading wrappers, mini lecture wrappers, assignment wrappers, also called meta assignments, where they're doing an assignment about how they're doing the assignment. Right? Exam wrappers, and then I'm really not going to talk about regular and occasional activities, but there is quite an assortment of them as well. So, what do you do at the beginning and the end of the course? What might you do? And again, if you don't like these ideas, there are more of them in the book. But these have been popular with people. Reading, giving students, assigning them a reading, short reading, about learning and thinking. And the reason why a discussion should follow is because they're going to want to talk about this. They're going to want to talk about it because they're going to be so surprised at what they read. And I have more than two, I have 4 recommendations for you, but you might have your own favorites. This first one, learning your first job, this is in your handout, page 3. This is a 12-page essay, and it talks about all kinds of things having to do with learning, from brain biology, the difference between knowledge and information, and students are always calling knowledge information. But sometimes that's the way they look at it. And also Nilson talks about the fact that learning is work. Learning takes effort. There's no way around it. It's not like the weather. Or maybe you make your own weather. And then I've got some even shorter assignments here, possible assignments. All of them. It's all free. If you assign this kind of reading, you want to have a discussion, these are some questions that I suggest that you may or may not want to use. The rest of these that I'm going to talk about are bookends. Okay, so this first one, goal setting. You have students write a little essay, and this can be homework, needn't take any class time at all. How I earned an A in this course. You want them to answer this question, and you might want to put some sort of, 150 words, 200 words at least, whatever. And there will be quite a few students who might not be getting A's, but they know what it would take to get an A. Okay, even your C students will say, go to class every day. I don't do that, right? But I know that if I were to get an A, I'd be doing that, right? Stay on top of the readings. Start papers a week before. Start studying for exams several days before the exam. And don't all leave it to the last minute. Right? They know that. Okay, they'll be able to dredge that out of their mind. The reason why you might want to have a discussion the next day after they write this is so the students who are doing that say, yes, I do this. It's not impossible. Because some of the students are going to look down this list and say, well, nobody does this, right? Nobody does this. And then the A students will say, well, I do. Yeah, I start a paper probably a week before it's due. Then my subconscious works on it for me, and it's a lot easier. It's easier? Oh, wow. This is going to come as a revelation for a lot of students because they've never really talked about their learning habits and their study habits and how they approach coursework. So this would be very valuable. At the end of the course, you have students write a little essay on how I earned an A in this course or not. And then they get to take stock of themselves and how they, how well they went, how well they worked on these good habits for getting an A. So the thing is that when they first talk about how to earn an A in this course, that will help them set goals, especially when they hear that there are other students in the class that do it. Say, well, maybe I'll go for an A. Now, at the end of the course, maybe the student who was, going to get a C, most likely, winds up getting a B and is pretty pleased, Okay, I didn't get an A, but, I skipped some classes, and I a couple of assignments that I kind of like dropped. And so that's why they'll start to take more responsibility for their grades. Self-assessment instruments on metacognitive skills. Also, if you look in your handout on page 4, you will see I talk about 2 of them. The first one, 27 items, is for problem-solving disciplines and thinking more like science, engineering, math, those sorts of problems. And a couple of samples here, but there are 27 items. Generally what students, well, the way these are arranged, that the way that you answer it is somewhere between always and never or rarely. So that's the way it works on the next one too, in the metacognitive awareness inventory. Or it's actually the metacognitive is an agree-disagree scale. But first one, I have control over how well I learn. All right, this is a critically important belief to have, that you have that control. If you don't have that control, then you're not going to be very metacognitive, are you? Because there's nothing I can do, right? It's the weather, And so students learn, by the way, by taking either one of these instruments, because they start to learn what these metacognitive skills are. And they might even want to talk about them, having control over how well they learn. Do I? It's a perfectly reasonable question. Perfectly reasonable. Because you don't learn necessarily, in those early years, you don't necessarily feel that sense of control when you're very young. So anyway, I commend these to you if you want to go in that direction. But these are good instruments, and they've been well validated. You could have students do a sort of open-ended reflective writing on something having to do with your discipline. And for instance, you can ask them, okay, what's a social science? Let's say you're teaching political science or something like that. What is a social science? Why is political science a social science? Now, this is especially useful in an intro class, because what you're going to find out is that a lot of students have a lot of misconceptions about your discipline. That's good. You can clear them up. All right? That's important. And so you do that, it's a before thing, and then you do it after, at the end of the course. And then students can compare these and find out how much more they understand the discipline now than they did when they were coming in. So they will, never say about your course, I didn't learn anything, right? Essay questions on the course material, which if you're giving an essay final, what you're doing is you're essentially giving the final on the first day. Or it might be the previous semester's final. It really doesn't matter. It's testing them on the material that they're going to be learning. Then, of course, you give the final. There are different ways you can do that final. By the way, if you do this the first day of class, second day of class, students won't have much to say. So don't worry about the time factor. Because you think, well, this is designed to be a 2-hour final. Well, since they don't know much of anything, they'll knock this thing off in 10 minutes and say, if you don't have an answer for this, that's fine. That doesn't matter. but I want you to be like, getting out of your head what you do know or what you think you know, and just taking stock, and this is somewhat a foreshadowing to what you're going to be learning. So what you're going to be able to answer at the end. You can tell them it's the final exam or not. If you just don't let them take pictures of it, because then they won't think about it. And the thing is that, students might talk about this afterwards, like, oh, do you remember what the third question was? I don't remember that, but I remember the second one, and so they'll sit around and talk about it. This is wonderful. This is what you want them to do, right? Sit around and talk about the material or what they're going to be learning. The worst that'll happen, that's the worst kind of thing that'll happen, that they will be, they'll perk up during the course for what questions they do remember when you get to those topics. And if this final exam represents your student learning outcomes, that's great. That's good. Right, because then students won't be so, in the dark about what's important to you. So, anyway, knowledge surveys, I'm going to explain what those are. They're a little bit misnamed, I think, because, they're a series of questions or tasks about the knowledge and skills in your course or in the unit that you're doing the knowledge survey on. And they can come from anywhere. But the answer, students are not solving the problem, they're not doing the task, they're not answering the question, but they're telling you how confident they feel about their ability to do that problem, to answer that question well. So it's really sort of a knowledge confidence survey. This is a very simple way you can arrange answers. I've seen much more colorful answers done by faculty members. You don't have to sit around and validate this. That's not what it's for. So rather than not at all confident, how about I don't have a clue? Or very confident saying I can ace this.
What's the purpose of that, though?
Okay.
Because they can be confident and be wrong.
Yes.
What do you actually learn from giving?
Okay, they are sort of assessing what they believe to be their knowledge. Okay, what the real gain comes in later on when they make the comparison either at the end of the unit or at the end of the course, when they can see where they were overconfident and how much more they learned.
So this might be helpful right before a test, or?
That's when some people will give it right before a test, because then students will, first of all, they do know something, all right, and then they'll realize, oh, I didn't feel very confident about these questions having to do with, I don't know, doing chi-square statistic, and so I really need to look that up. I really need to review that, so it can be useful for that. But just in terms of like their awareness of their learning, when you do the bookends part, that's where the real benefit comes in. But it also foreshadows what you're going to learn, and it can get some people interested. And, yeah.
I am going to ask here's a question along the same lines as Joe. So let's say, for instance, on a day before an exam period, I'll give a course activity that has questions from an exam I gave a year before, allowing them to work in groups.
Cool.
Right? Hopefully, now, I mean, this is my hopefully, maybe I'm making assumptions that I shouldn't be, right? If they look at something and say, I have no clue, right?
Yeah.
Do they have to articulate, or is there an advantage to actually articulating that in some form? Or is that just not automatic? That's my question, right? I mean, what is the advantage of, asking it this way to where they actually have to respond over just hoping they catch it, I guess. I mean, that's...
Hoping that they catch.
That they don't know how to, they're not
Oh,
confident.
oh,
right? Again, I'm hoping this is happening.
So what's the difference between, say, having them fill out a confidence survey as opposed to doing it?
Doing it, right?
And then they don't know how to do it. And
Right. Okay. First of all, time. Okay. I've heard of knowledge surveys that are as long as 200 quote questions that students aren't doing, and students can get through that in 20 minutes.
I see. Okay. I
Yeah,
see.
yeah. This is not, however, a good measure of actual, well, of what students actually know.
Okay.
Yeah. But this is what they think they know.
Okay, now I'm tracking.
Yeah, okay, all right. Because most students are going to overestimate their knowledge and skills or over-evaluate them. Except your best students who will underestimate it because they can't do something perfectly, they can't do it, right? But particularly, just generally when they don't know much, they are most likely to fall into this overestimation. However, there's some fields, the more technical fields, STEM and health, medical fields, it's less likely because of the esoteric vocabulary. So if they've never seen the word before, if they don't know what orthogonality is, they simply don't know. And they don't know because they've never seen it before. And that's quite true, or hypothesis. That's another one that's a hard one to BS through. So anyway, but that's true in those fields and not so much in the humanities and social sciences that will borrow terms from more everyday vocabulary. So even if like the word norm in sociology, my field, means a rule for behavior, right? But it looks like kind of like normal, doesn't it? If you've never heard of a norm before, you know. And so a student might think, yeah, I think I could BS my way through defining this one, you know. But they really couldn't. I mean, they wouldn't be accurate, you know. So that's the difference between different disciplines. So, and this is one just for the end of the course, and it's very, very popular. It's popular with faculty. It's popular with students. Writing a letter to the next cohort of students for the course, in the course. And how to do well in the course, what it'll take, what they need to do, and what are the cool things they're going to learn. Okay. As from another student, and students believe other students. We could talk about the cool things we're going to learn, they're not interested, right? Well, you think it's cool. But, you know, hey, my peers think it's cool. So what you can do this, you can have the whole course, the whole class do this, and then you just get blanket permission from all of them to, you know, to pass them down if you want to. You should pass down a few, pass down maybe 3 good ones, and for the next cohort of students to read, they will read these. I can guarantee you. You needn't give them a quiz or anything like that. They will definitely do this reading. If they do no other reading, see, they'll do some reading. Okay. So, which any of these activities or pairs of activities sort of, I don't know, grab your attention? Yeah.
I like the idea of using the final to in the beginning to show them, you know, how many,
Yeah.
what they're going to learn. I guess.
Yeah.
Does it have to be secret? Why do you keep
Yeah.
it
Why do we keep it a secret? Like, what's the idea? I mean, you know. So what? You send it home to your mother to do it? I mean.
The challenge is, I mean, I can see advantages in certain classes for sure, but like mine, for instance, like you said, there's so much language development. Like, I mean, those, like literally, other than the, you know, the thes and the ands and the whatever else, like everything else they read, it will have no meaning, right? So they won't, I don't think they'll be able to assimilate it enough to connect back later that, oh, I saw this and this is something that's going to show up. Right?
Yes.
I mean, it's
Yes.
just so,
Yes.
so challenging. I just don't think there's any way.
Yeah.
I mean, just depending on the nature of the class.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it would
Yeah.
be the same in a language class, right? If you take
Yeah.
Spanish
Certainly.
1 for the first time.
Certainly.
I mean,
Yeah.
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 That's a good point. I've tried to do the pre-test at the beginning of the semester as, you know, multiple choice, but I don't give multiple choice tests at
Oh.
the
Right,
midterm
right.
and final, so
Uh-huh.
it's atypical of me, so it's not really a true measure
Yeah.
for the student.
Yeah. It's not something they can do before and after and really see that, you know, I didn't know what I was talking about over here. Matter of fact, I had very little to say, but look at me now. You know? I am a changed person.
Right. I mean, I just love
Yeah,
the
yeah.
idea of either this article
Yeah.
by
Nilson? Leamson, I know.
Or
It's a hard
something
one.
else like that, or
Yeah.
these metacognitive inventories.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of teaching your students about their metacognition,
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's just a win-win. They win,
Yeah.
you win,
Oh, yeah.
the rest of the course wins,
Yeah.
the rest of their
Yeah.
life wins.
Yeah. Everybody wins. It's a, and you don't lose much time doing these things, particularly when you're doing them outside of class. I mean, if you're worried about the time.
But the thing for me also though, if we do this in a more structured way where our students in their first and second years are getting a lot of this, right? You shouldn't have to necessarily double back in the junior and senior year either, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's ways to strategize this across the curriculum in ways that you're reaping those
Yep.
benefits long term, right? So this
Yep.
is one of those things, this ought to be the first thing they're seeing,
Yeah.
right, in our
Yes.
classes coming into our curriculum. So I mean, that's how I feel like.
And this is the way it works best, when these things get repeated throughout, throughout the curriculum, in a program. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, about the test at the beginning, I guess
Yeah.
I used to do this in a class when I was teaching a math class.
Uh-huh.
And I found, and maybe this is a good thing, but I found students absolutely freaked out by it, right? Because they were like, I'll never be able to do this. And a lot of them had confidence issues to begin with,
Yeah,
right? So it was kind of like kicking them while they were down.
But you will be able to do it.
Invitation to perhaps this process of exploring why your emotions may get in the way of you doing things and so on. So fair enough.
Yeah.
And I that's typically what happened. I'd spend
Yeah,
weeks kind of
yeah.
picking up the pieces and saying, well, this is how you need to think about
Yeah.
this. So like maybe
Yeah.
doing a little training with them,
Yes.
not as structured as this,
Yeah.
which would have been
Yeah.
helpful. But
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but I actually stopped doing it because I thought I was spending too much time in that course, given that material, having shaken in a way their confidence
Yeah.
a little further
Yeah.
to then build
Yeah.
it up again, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I heard of this happening in another course. It was a biology course, and it was like giving like the final, and there was this one cheery girl who came up to the professor and said, "But I took biology in high school," as if like that was biology. What she had in high school was the field of biology, and like no.
well, I mean, there's something useful perhaps about
Yeah.
that shock of, no, I think there were probably two things. One, biology was the whole field, and maybe I actually didn't learn anything in biology, right? And in a way, those are all good lessons to learn, but they're hard ones
Yeah.
at the beginning of a course, and then you better be prepared to deal with that if you're going
Yeah,
to shock
I
the
know.
student that way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that in math in particular, I found at that point, I mean, I don't teach much mathy things now, but because so many students came in going with that emotional, mental
yeah.
self-talk switch of I'm no good at math and I can't do this,
Yeah, well-
that if you hit them with that right at the beginning, it was really hard to
Yeah,
get them
it's
back
just-
onto a positive track. Like
Even though you say to them, well, you don't know how to do it yet, but this is what you're going to learn how to do.
Yeah.
But they don't believe you.
With that.
They don't believe you.
Their experience is such that in past,
Yeah.
that's not how it worked out for them.
Oh.
I have a similar
Right, for
problem
many of them.
when I start off with, here's this chunk of information from the classes you took before that are relevant to the class that you're in now that you should know. And unfortunately, it has the same demoralizing effect,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember the stuff I need to know from the class
Yeah.
before that's
Yeah.
relevant. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, you hope it'll be motivational to do that little extra work early on to mark the semester strong, but I think in some ways it has this kind of defeatist strategy
Yeah.
for some students in particular, like, I'm doomed from the beginning, right?
They have no faith in their ability to learn.
No, well, like a class like mine or like math classes, it's the same thing, right? It's like they have gotten in their mind, oh, I'm no good at math, right? So it's that self-fulfilling prophecy thing, right? I mean, my course has a reputation of being extremely difficult and challenging. So they're coming in having students tell horror stories of, how horrible it was when it really wasn't that bad, just because it's fun to do, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right? Yeah, it's just, they're very nervous. I mean, I found, I'm needing to try to develop strategies to kind of de-stress before we start. And that's, and I don't know, for my class, these kind of activities just, seem to
Yeah.
send the stress
Yeah.
levels through the roof.
Yeah, and if that's what's going to happen, use something else.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
I like that just end. I have a class
Yeah.
that I tell them, like, you all do horrible on your first test because
Yeah.
you think it's fun and
Yeah.
you sit and talk and you don't study and you don't read and you
Yeah.
all do horrible.
Yeah.
And this happens
Yeah.
every
Every year.
semester.
Yeah.
I'm like, you all do horrible. So here's my recommendations. Look at the study guide.
Yeah.
Read
Yeah.
those portions.
Yeah, yeah,
And then they take
yeah.
their first test and they're like, why did we do so bad?
Yeah.
And I had a second test today and I was like, did this feel better? And they're like, yeah. I was like, why? Because we looked at the study guide and I was like, but that's
Hey.
what I said.
It's a revelation, isn't it?
But going back to this just end of the course, as you were talking, I was like, oh man, it might be different if I had some poll that I gave my students at the end, and instead of me saying,
Yeah, they don't.
here's the typical thing that happens
Yeah.
in this course,
Yeah, they don't believe us.
then I wonder if I showed them some graph or something of like,
Yeah.
here's what students feel like helps them the most in
Yeah,
this
yeah,
course.
yeah,
That would
yeah,
probably be
yeah.
better than my.
Yeah,
But you know what, I still think, I mean, I'm a person that like deals with, you know, deadlines and boundaries and need and necessity and all that stuff. I think sometimes they have to fail
Totally.
to know that they just.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think that's what happens.
Yeah, the problem is
That's
they've probably been
just-
successful doing whatever that is that they did in previous courses, right, up
Yeah.
until this point. And so why should they think
yeah,
that anything less, would, you know, anything more would be necessary, right? And so,
yeah, yeah,
again, it's not until what you've always done ceases to work that
Yeah.
you ask the question, what more can I do, right?
yeah. Or what are some other strategies?
Yeah.
What might work better? And you told them, granted, but again, they hear it. See, we're too old to know anything. Okay, we're just too old. We don't know anything that's relevant for their world. You see.
Well, it's really, I feel like for me, you're teaching me about, this is very common in the workplace too.
Yeah.
When you're trying to teach someone that they've been doing for a very long time, like there's a better method to do things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah. Resistance to change. It seems to just be built into us. You know, even if what we've been doing is failing. Yeah.
Surely the next time, right?
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah, surely. Right, exactly.
The system is stacked against you.
Yeah, exactly.
It isn't wrong, it's
Yes.
the system that needs to change.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Surely the next time. That's like that's what the thinking of the gambler, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, okay. So in just a few minutes, I know I'm falling so far behind. I got a late start, right? Okay. In a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to do a free recall activity. So listen up, right? So we're going to talk about reading wrappers now. And here are some reading wrappers. And again, this gets students they've got to hand something into you, right? So this gets them to do the readings. You're giving them a point or 5 points, whatever, for doing this. Some sort of reflection question, or minute papers, as they're sometimes called, about what they found to be the most surprising, most valuable, most useful, whatever, out of the reading. What was least clear, what didn't make any sense, that helped or hindered their understanding, and what are their emotional reactions, which in some disciplines that will make a lot of sense to have them, quote, get in touch with their feelings, right? Yeah. So, connections, any kinds of questions where they're connecting what they're learning to their prior knowledge or the beliefs and values, other disciplines or courses. And self-testing, this is one that's extremely, well, it's been researched all over the place, and it's extremely effective. Read, recall, review. So you tell your students, read the material, put the book away, free recall as much as you can, and you will want them to write it down if you want them to do this as homework, but some people like to recite it, okay? And again, if you don't have to do it as homework, it's fine. So they write down what they can, and you don't care what they write down because, step 3, they go back over the chapter looking for what they misunderstood and forgot, and then they recall that again. Flashcards. That's what the whole thinking is along the flashcard realm. So the research has found that there is way better immediate and delayed. Now, to a psychologist, delayed can mean like 2 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. Delayed recall, not 3 years, of fact-based passages than rereading. And it's just as good as note-taking, only it's a lot quicker than note-taking. And students get deliberate practice, that's practice with feedback, and retrieval practice from this exercise. And the retrieval, you know, the more often you retrieve something, remember something, the easier it is to remember the next time when you have to remember it. Students' default method is rereading. And you can tell them the good news is that they're wasting their time because they don't like it either. You know, I mean, it's easy, but it's mindless. It's inefficient. And so you can spend less time doing read, recall, review, and get a lot more mileage out of it.
So explain to me again, what was different about review than rereading? Because I misunderstood the first.
I said read, recall. Because you're looking for things. Okay.
So you're only looking for deficiencies, basically.
You're looking, yes. Now your eye might go over something you already know. I mean, but you're looking for what you didn't get right. Okay, let's say you recalled something, but you started writing it and you realized, like, I don't know that I understand this. Well, I'm going to put down this, but I'm not sure that that's right.
Okay.
Or you just left it out.
Okay.
You say, oh God, I know there was something in some section there that I didn't, but
Okay.
that's.
Now you want to know.
Okay.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So now you're
exactly.
rereading parts with a purpose, right?
Yes,
And so-
yes.
okay.
This is why, one of the reasons why we read so efficiently. I could talk about reading all day. This is terrible. But one of the reasons why we do is because we're looking for things. When we sit down with a journal article, we are cued. First of all, we don't go from the first word to the last word. It's just not what we do. We pick and choose, right?
Yeah.
The abstract and the title, all right. But then we'll start going through this, right? The next thing is to review the literature. That's the last thing we look at, unless, of course, we want to see if we're cited. And then you go right to the references, right? And you check it out. And if you see your name in it, then you go there. But if you're actually reading this for learning something from it, you probably, so you got the gist of it, right? And what do? You probably check out the results section, results and discussion. Then you go to, well, how did they get that? You go to the methods, right? And then you're wandering around, but you're looking for things because this is what's important to us in an article. Even though it's not the way we will necessarily write. Well, sometimes we do write. That can be a very good way to write an article, by the way. You start with the results, and then you build the discussion section around the results. Now, or you write the method section first, because you already did that. That's just history, right? So anyway, it's funny because we otherwise lay it out in a sort of crazy way. We don't write it this way. We don't read it this way. Unless we don't know how to read. And that's what students will do with journal articles, first word, last word. And so it's just not the way we really do things. So, and then there are visual study tools, where you ask students to make visuals on what they just read or the video they just saw. And this is we are, as animals go, we are highly visual. And our vision is our best sense for survival. We've got good depth perception. Other animals don't. We're way better than they are. We see color. Many animals do not see color at all. No, they function fine, but they've got a good smeller. They've got better ears. They've got this business. They can turn it around. And so they can really hear things that we can't hear very well. Or as well as they can. But our eyes, if we made it through the savannah at all, this is how we did it, right? Because we could see things. And we could see predators in particular. That's what we had to be worried about and get away from them in time. So our vision is very useful for learning as well, and very strong sense for us. When we make visuals, students make visuals, whatever, they are organizing that material. They are structuring that material. And that's the way we learn things, first of all, conceptually, and long term. That's the way we file things. This is how you remember your discipline. You've got it organized. And probably if you really kind of look in your head, it's sort of like a visual. It might be a little bit like a concept map, but certain parts of it will look like a flow chart because it's a process or a procedure. And so we've got this up here, and it will stay up there. It could stay up there all our lives. All our lives. We don't forget these things. And we know when we learn new knowledge, we know exactly where to file it. What branch of whatever visual that we have up in our heads. So, even when we just use visuals, like when students use visuals, maybe they're in the book, or maybe you supply them, whatever, that using visuals just takes a lot less brain effort. Lower cognitive load, as they call it. Less work for our cognitive parts to do. Less working memory, fewer cognitive transformations. Reading is not the most efficient way for us to gather information. It just isn't. It's great, you know, and this makes collective learning, and we can pass everything down, and this is a wonderful thing. And we can be way more specific than we can be in only pictures. Okay, it's wonderful that way. However, for learning, reading takes a lot of cognitive transformations. We forget this because, at least in our discipline, we do it, we don't even think about it, right? It's a snap. And so we somehow project that onto our students, and we are like so wrong. And the best thing for us to, let's say if we're in English, we ought to go take an engineering course. See what that feels like. Because we'll be much more in the role of the student in having to make those heavy-duty cognitive transformations that they have to do when they are reading letter by letter, word to word, phrase by phrase, sentence by sentence, and then you try to remember that after all that work, right? You're exhausted. Your brain's exhausted. So you can't think about the material. There's nothing left up there. Visuals also cue text that's on the visual and the details of the visual and helps retrieval. If you have any doubt about that, I want you to think back to your college days when you were in an exam and there was something that you couldn't remember and you desperately needed to remember, right? So maybe you pictured the page of the textbook where you read it. And you could see where it was on the page, and you could almost read it. As if you read it to begin with, right? So you must have done a good job to begin with. But what happened was that your brain, with no effort whatsoever, you weren't even aware, took a picture of the page, and all the other pages for that matter, the shape of it, right, the layout of it, snapped that, you know, put it instantly in long-term memory where you could, you know, just pull it out. And that cued the text for you, which is what you really needed for that exam. But isn't that amazing of what our brain will seamlessly do? You know, and it does that tactily too. It does that with touch. So if we were really good to our students and had unlimited money, we would make books that had different page textures. You know. Yeah, exactly. Say, ooh, this is like fur. Oh, ooh, this feels like lettuce. So anyway, and visuals are also cross-cultural. So if English isn't your first language, you are much less handicapped because there aren't that many words in the visual. So visuals they're just the coolest thing since, I don't know what, ice cubes. Here's some common visuals that, you know, depending upon the material. Flow charts are really good for sequences of events and processes. Concept circle diagrams, I've probably heard of Venn diagrams. And concept circle diagrams is the category that Venn diagrams fall into. But they're all different kinds. They show the relationship among categories and concepts. Concepts are just categories of observations. Equations, topics, principles, these sorts of things. Matrix, wonderful for compare and contrast or classification. And this is just an example of 20th century wars that the United States was in, and different features of it. But so if you have students do this, let's say for a review for the exam, students, as long as students fill in the cells, they've got to do the fill in the cells, then they will be able to, they'll remember the matrix, and they'll almost be able to read those cells, just from the visual cue. Cycles, some knowledge falls in cycles. Concept maps, when you've got hierarchically organized knowledge, this is a wonderful sort of format to use. And then you've got the mind map, which is really, this is hierarchical too, but it's just like more like spread out in all directions. It's good for free association as well. This is good when you're writing something and you don't know how to organize it because there's no format for it, like for research articles, or there's a format for different types of research articles. But let's say you're writing a book and there's no guideline. Do that. Start with that. Play with it for a while, and it will really help you get organized. So now we're going to do the little periodic free recall. So make your notes go away and start recalling all that you can. Just write it down. Start writing things down. Now, I'm not going to ask you what you wrote down. I'm going to ask you how this is feeling, what your mind's doing, what you noticed happening in this process. So just free recall on reading wrappers. This is something you ask your students to do. How's this process working for you? What's your mind doing? What's that?
Visualize the slides. Actually.
Visualize the slides. Yeah. That's really interesting. You took pictures. Your mind took pictures of the slides. Yeah. Not all the words necessarily, but the shapes.
Overall structure.
Yeah. And that cued you. Mm-hmm. And sort of then one thing led to another, right? I mean, one recall led to another recall. It's so funny when you do this. I've done this with faculty a number of times, and some faculty get anxious as if they're taking a test. I said, no. You are not taking a test. Nor will your students get anxious, because here's why. You first of all, you told them you were going to do this. Okay, let's start there. And you told them this is going to help them learn, and it really does, because this is like read, recall, review, all right? Because the review, they're going to write down what they can recall, but you're going to ask them to leave space between their recollections, and then they're going to work with their neighbor to fill in the blanks. So there really isn't that much to worry about. And working with your neighbor, that your neighbor will say, well, I remember this, and then you go, oh yeah, I remember that too. So it really is it's a kind of read, recall, review all over again, but it's done socially, and that's really neat. And again, it'll work like read, recall, review, and a reading. Students will remember a lot better than they otherwise would. This is another mini lecture wrapper, active listening checks. And what you do here is you say, and you tell them in advance you're going to do this. Okay, you say, listen up. I'm going to ask you in 15 minutes what are the 3 most important points that I made. So, okay, we'll listen. And then at the end of that, you ask them to write those things down, and then you pick them up, and then you reveal those most important points, and then students self-assess their listening. Students get really good at this. Remember, they're motivated to learn how to listen to you. From the first to the third time, first time this was done in the research on it, 45% of the students got all 3 points correct. They listened that well. By the third time, 75% of the students got all 3 points correct. They really improved quickly. And so, some people say, well, if I had to do this with my students, I would be better organized as well, right? So that's another win-win, right? And then you can do a minute paper, those reflections, for instance, having students make connections or talk about the most important stuff. You can have them do a visual on what you were just talking about, or you can have them do the concept test, which is what we did at the beginning. A few things about meta assignments. Math, anybody here math-based? Teaching a math-based area? Because you can have them.
Sometimes, but not.
Yeah. When students say, I understood what you said, but I can't do the problems, well, they start doing the problems at the end of class in pairs, and they guide each other through it. There's another thing with problem solving, math-based problem solving, or science-based, is to have students correct their errors on their homework, but also in exams. We don't utilize student error to the fullest. Because students think, oh, error, there's an X through it, it's a failure, right? No. This is a learning opportunity, one that will really stick with you. And so, and we're willing to let it go as if, well, I'm not going to worry about their not being able to solve that kind of problem. Well, that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? Is getting them to do that. So you have them write out an error analysis and solve the same problem or similar problem. Some people say, well, how about writing out the correct strategy? Well, you can do that too. It really doesn't matter. What students are doing some writing about their thinking processes. And then they're learning to solve the problem. And this can be done very easily in class, in small groups. So. Then there are papers and projects. It depends on what the paper and project is as to what you might ask them to do. But basically, what they're doing is they are watching themselves write the paper or do the project and recording what they are seeing. They are writing about the process they are following, the writing process, the research process, whatever. They are writing about the reasoning that they are using to solve the problem, particularly like fuzzy problems, case-based, or problem-based learning problems. They are evaluating themselves at the end of it and evaluating their progress. If your students aren't reading your feedback on their papers or what have you, you have students paraphrase that feedback back to you. This way, they must read it. And that's just a follow-up assignment, and that's just the way it is. And you give them some sort of points for it. So this way, they will read it. They will read it. And you might find out that you're miscommunicating in certain circumstances as well. You can, if they're going to revise the paper, they set out their goals and strategies first. They think first. They plan. You can ask them to talk about the value of the assignment, the skills that they improved, or you could ask them to give advice to the next cohort of students on that particular assignment, particularly for like a major assignment, as in what approach to take, what approach maybe not to take, what strategies to use, what problems they might run into, how to overcome those problems, the value of the assignment, You can have them write about any number of things, and they will do a bang-up job. And of course, you, again, blanket permission, and you make these available to students before they do the assignment in the next class. And they will pay a great deal of attention, more so than to our rubrics and our directions and all that. So, if you do experiential learning, like SL is service learning, field work, simulations, role plays, the reflection might be such a big part of the assignment that that it's a long assignment and you want to grade that on a rubric. That's up to you. But in any case, these are the sorts of things that you might want students to do to connect the experience back to the outcomes in the course and the course in general, the content. To look at, explain their goals and strategies and decisions that they made along the way, which is especially true in something like role-playing or simulation. What decisions did you make? How did you respond to other players? What were you thinking? Would you do it differently? Or evaluate how well you achieved your goals and in general, your performance. I'm going to skip this. Post-exam wrappers. This has been known to be life-changing for students because they finally start seeing that they made their own destiny, they made their own fate. So you've given back the graded exams, and you get students to look at what they got and to think about what they expected and to make a comparison, to get in touch with their feelings about it, right, about the difference. Now, some of them, there's, I expected to get an A, I got an A. I expected to get a B, and I got an A. That, happy, but not all of them. How many hours did you study for this exam? Was it enough? What did you do for your study strategies? What were you doing? Were you rereading the way I told you not to do? And this because it was by default, that's what you've been doing. It doesn't work. Why did you lose points? And do you see any patterns? This will also get them to look at your feedback because they have to say something. Again, this is something that you just give them they do it, they get 3 points or what have you. And what are you going to do differently for the next exam? To, what goal will you set and what study plan will you follow? I mentioned this before. You can have students resolve problems they did not solve correctly to begin with, and explain what they did wrong or what the correct strategy is. And then there's the test autopsy. It's an error analysis form, and you can add reflection probes if you want to. Some people do. So it looks like this, where, okay, points lost, okay, what was the type of question? Multiple choice, short answer, essay, whatever. Why was the answer incorrect? Okay, in other words, what did you do wrong? And you can see that these are all things that students will, and you can change these all you want, but these are all things that students will tend to do. Poor time management, did not finish. Just sloppy, arithmetic errors or something like that. Misinterpreted the question, didn't read it carefully enough. Didn't study all the material, whatever. And see, you're not involved in this. They're taking responsibility for what they did or did not do. But this can be just life-changing for students. And they always do better the next time. So, what's the most useful or valuable thing that you learned during this workshop? Makes you review, doesn't it? This is a good question to ask at the end of class. Because it makes you reflect, think, okay, what happened? Oh.
Well, I think it's empowering, because I just did a mid-semester review with my students as going through this workshop.
Yeah.
It's empowering me to put the responsibility back on the students to learn. And
They have
some
to.
ways to do it, because I get stuck in my head thinking, oh, I've got to do this, but I've got to do this, but I'm doing some really fantastic things. So now it's about showing them how they need to take responsibility for their learning.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, and empowering them. I mean, taking responsibility, that sounds like a burden, but be empowered.
right.
Yeah.
They actually can control it. They can control their emotions. I like
Yeah.
that part.
Yeah, yeah. And they're in control of their destiny, which is something that, you know, I mean, you rightfully don't feel that way when you're 6 years old, but, you know, you grow up and then you go, oh my goodness, this is all on me, isn't it?
I think the language and structure is helpful. Like, nobody talked about metacognition to me when I was a student.
No.
But these are things we read a lot more, I think, and we did a lot of self-evaluation just naturally. Like,
Yes.
wow, that didn't work, you know?
Yes,
I'm not
yes.
going to do it that way again,
Yes.
right? I'm going to try something else, you know?
Yeah.
And I think I kind of, for a long time, have assumed that students have similar experiences coming now, but I just really find that they, again, reading is really, really, really a challenge to them.
Yeah.
And I think
They didn't
just
do
being
much
able
of it.
to put language to what I'm thinking, like just have an
Yeah.
idea or a tool to wrap it in,
Yeah.
and that they're not alone in this experience, right? And that if they haven't learned to do this, right, well, now's a great time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's not too late. I mean, people learn to read. People who are not literate when they're 60 learn to read.
Yeah.
So many of the things that you've shared lend themselves to helping students see how much they've learned.
Yeah.
And I think that gets lost sometimes.
Yeah.
That they're just not aware of
No,
how
they're
much
not.
they've learned.
Yeah.
Like you have here for the service learning,
Yeah.
to have them reflect and think, how does this relate to our goals for this course?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I never thought about having students think about that, but
Yeah.
it's why we're doing it, or why we did do it already. Like,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
am I learning from this?
Yeah. Yeah.
But even in chemistry, you know, I didn't used to know this, now I know
See,
this.
so that's a great question. So why don't we do on a test wrapper? I just thought of this. Why don't we do on a test wrapper? Because like you said, they're not focused on the fact that I understood 70% of the material on here. They're focused on the fact that I missed 30%.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are the strategies you used that were helpful in answering the 70% that you got right?
Uh-huh.
How could you consider increasing use, right, in those areas, right? Because I do the same thing. I have them correct.
That's a good
I have them
idea.
correct things that they missed.
Uh-huh.
But like, I mean, well, really, you got most of it, right? I mean, you didn't get it all, but you got most of it. How were you able to, how were you able to do that, right?
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
and could that be part of the test autopsy, where you're asking
think
the
so.
things, and then what will you do differently next time, or, I don't know, what strategies?
Yeah. Or
should
what
you be
what
using?
worked? What worked in your preparation versus what didn't work? I mean, what did you do to study? I mean, that can sort of begin to tap at this, but I think I like the idea of saying, what did you do right? Because when we're grading or when we're going over a paper, making comments, whatever, we don't talk enough about that. You know, yeah, what did you do right? Don't just give me a happy face. Tell me what I did. Why are you happy? So yeah, we're very much focused on what they did wrong. We feel very responsible for letting them know that, but not what they did right. I mean, a lot of A students have no clue about why they're getting A's. You know, so
It's time for us to.
yes, I know. It was so much fun. Thank you all. This was delightful just with a few of you. It really was.